There is one moment I will never forget. When Donald Trump first term was meeting with the European world leaders, and he shoulders his way to the front of the crowd, and he stands proudly, chin high in the middle. That was a moment that I loved. But it's also a moment where I can at least understand how some people don't like Donald Trump's bravado. You know, some people love when basketball players do all the cheering and flexing after a dunk, and some people don't like it. I can understand it. It's just a difference. But I love that kind of attitude. It was symbolic that America will not take a backseat to anybody. We are the greatest country in the world, and Donald Trump was no longer going to let the foreign order see us and treat us as just a naive open wallet that everybody could rob. But even then, during that time, I wasn't like a massive Trump supporter. For that, you have to fast forward to early 2021. Now, this is funny because this is arguably Donald Trump's most unpopular right after January 6th. But this is when I was in Los Angeles, and on the news, all I was seeing was time and time again, Biden just failing and embarrassing himself. And after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, I decided I was going to buy a MAGA hat. And even at the time, the MAGA hat wasn't a pro-Trump hat as much as it was an anti-Biden hat. I thought, this guy is wrecking America, and the message on this hat is more applicable now than it was when Trump first was running. And I started seeing Biden propose things that went directly against my self-interest. Removing the 1031 exchange away from real estate, all of my real estate investors will know this. Increasing capital gains tax, and the overwhelmingly authoritarian COVID lockdown measures. I was living in LA, which was even worse, but it put an even more sour taste in my mouth for the Democrat agenda. So I started wearing my MAGA hat literally everywhere in public, in the middle of LA, in the height of Donald Trump's unpopularity. And the reason I started doing that was to show my opposition towards Joe Biden. But more so, as Joe Biden's failures started to compile, I wanted to hear from the other side what was so wonderful about Joe Biden. And at that time, because the sentiment against Donald Trump was so strong, if you were a white person wearing the MAGA hat, you might get punched out in public. But even if you don't get punched, you're going to be called a white supremacist, a racist, and that's where the conversation ends. With me, you couldn't do that. I'm black. You can't call me a white supremacist or a racist. It invalidates your argument, and more than anything, it makes you look ignorant. It makes you look racist. How can another white person tell a black person what they ought to feel, how they ought to interpret somebody's words, implying that black people can't think for themselves and that we need to listen to your white liberal opinion because it's so morally superior. And over the years, as Biden kept making bad decision after bad decision, my ammunition for my talking points only increased. And over this time, I spoke with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people about Donald Trump, about politics. And I gained another critical perspective, which was how people think. When talking to my rich friends and mentors, I started to see how high productive, high income people thought. I started to see how middle class people thought. I started to see how poor people thought. And it was during these 4 years that the Democrat Party started forcing their cultural agenda down everybody's throats. It's cool to hate America. America's evil. America's systemically racist. We should be ashamed of who we are. Trying to enforce a victim mindset on everybody. Trying to tell black people they are lesser than their white counterparts. Trying to tell white people that they're inherently evil because of their skin color. Trying to push for radical socialist policies. Trying to uproot reality and say that men can become women. Losing all sense of American pride and depicting on the world stage that the president is somebody that can be taken advantage of, not somebody that should be respected, someone whose main goal is to appease foreign leaders. Over this time, as I was growing and learning and changing, I knew I was a conservative because my fundamental belief is that the government does not exist to be everybody's mommy. It exists to protect and defend our individual rights and liberties. A government that controls every aspect of your life and tells you what you can and cannot do isn't for free-thinking, ambitious individuals. It's for the people who don't want the burden of being responsible for their individual choices, who are exhausted at the idea of having to be self-sufficient and be in charge of taking care of themselves. I believe people should strive to be self-sufficient, not dependent on the government. So not only did I hate the Democrat policies, I hated the overall weak, guilty, America-hating energy, but I also hated their insane anti-reality, anti-science cultural movement. And over the years from 2021 to 22 to 23 to 24, when I was talking to people, I could slowly see that the sentiment was getting so against the Democrats that Donald Trump was making a resurgence. I would get more nods, more winks, more thumbs up, more secret, nice hat, bro. Because those same things were turning off the majority of people. And this is in deep blue California. Around 2024, I could see that the vibe did a complete 180. I almost never got any negative comments about my hat. It was all positive.